Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Mildly Gothic. If you're new here, what I like to do is a variety of artsy things, and today is part 4, I want to say, of my recent, and I think part 6 if I include the 2 of the crown from last year, of my Philippa Georgiou cosplay. There is one more video to come, and that is on how the convention went and everything. It is past the point of the convention now, but unlike how I did last year, where I posted the review before the final product, I'm gonna post the full everything coming together and then talk about the convention in the next one. So today I'm gonna be talking about how I put together this sword. That's one of the big things. And then also all of the little details and stuff that went into some of the other pieces, like the belt. This is basically the last video. Essentially after this, everything is done. So it touches a little bit of everything. I'm pretty sure it touches some of the chest, it touches some of the jacket. And if you have no clue what I'm talking about, I'll make sure to link my playlist for all the other pieces of this costume up there. This thing has been a labor of love, and I'm so happy to show you guys the final product of where this got to. And even more so because unless you follow me on social media, you won't know, but I'll leave that for next video unless you want to go check me out on Instagram at Mildly Gothic and see what my latest update was over there. So with all of that said, let's get to the video. So I have no idea what stage I left recording in, but a little bit's happened, and it's kind of because I've been doing bits and pieces here and there because I'm kind of getting into a crunch time. So I'm just trying to work on some smaller pieces. So these are the pieces I've created that are going to go on the collar of the jacket. Obviously all of this still needs to be primed and painted, but because these are so small and the way I'm going to have to prime and paint them, I'm basically trying to get all of them done so I can just stick them to the sheet, basically the tarp, and paint them all at once. So these are the pieces that are going to go on the collar. These are made out of the 2 pieces of very thin foam, and I just kind of approximated the shape. I made sure they at least have the same number of lines across them. I don't know if they have the same number of lines that hers do, and they might even be too big. So stuff with these to be determined, but these are for the collar, and there's luckily already a nice curve to them, and they'll cover at least halfway around, which is basically what I want. So then I have the belt pieces. So these are the skinnier portion of, for the skinnier portion of the belt. So these are what are going to attach to the sword directly. And so I have 2 pieces. I believe this long one should be enough to go all the way around to the back of her waist. And this one is the short piece for the front, and I will need another short piece so that I can kind of like match the dimensions. These are, again, it's the super thin piece and then layers of the thin one. So I cut out strips, kind of like how I did the border for the waist piece that's attached to the chest plate. Thin border. I kept all of these thin because none of these look like they stand out as much as the chest plate details do. And then these are just obviously cut out little rectangles that were glued on. So I've got those 2 pieces there. And this is how I'm getting started for the sword. So these are the thickest foam that I have doubled up because these pieces need to be relatively thick. And the way I kind of figured out the dimensions for this is it looks like it should be a 2-handed sword. So with that, I need to make sure the hilt is big enough that I can get both of my hands. So what I did, I could have done this with any ruler, but I decided to do it with my tailor's tape measure. I don't know why, but basically place the bottom at the end of one hand, place the other at the top, and 7 inches is essentially how long the hilt should be for me for it to be a proper 2-handed weapon. Which makes sense because it's a full sword. It's not like a short sword, so in order to have reasonable stability, that's how big it needs to be. And then using that 7 inches as a scale, it now no longer matters how big the image is. As long as I keep the pieces in relation to each other, I can kind of approximate and figure out how big some of the other pieces are. So the pommel, the tail piece, looks like it's about half the length of the handle. So I needed my pommel to be about 3.5 inches, which, as you can see, we are going to be, with the addition of the little base at the bottom, basically perfectly on that 3.5 inches. So that's what I'm working with as far as the sword measurements. If it ends up looking a little big, it's a fantasy weapon. We're just going to go with it. So all of these are double layered, and these are like the 3rd iteration. I've cut so many of these out, and they're not perfect. The next step that I'm about to get to is I'm going to use so much clay foam. and I'm going to put it on the inside of this. This actually came out looking really solid. I don't know that I need to do much for the centerpiece, but I'm going to get these all nice and smoothed down if possible. And I'm going to mark out the 3 dots, because in order to get these to sit nice, I'm going to basically carve out little dots. It'll probably be easier to flatten this, actually. I'll probably just flatten these to the same plane, so these can be more pushed up against those walls, so it'll have that little bit more closed that it's supposed to, and I'll center them. And then this goes on the bottom, and so that's the pommel. There's some trying to figure out how I'm going to make the handle, because I don't have any more of the semicircle pieces that I used for the hammer from last year, so I'm debating if I want to go try to find more in store, because I don't know if they're going to have it. So the backup plan, if not, is I have plenty of this thick material, and I'm basically going to layer it and then take the super thin material or the moldable clay foam and basically smear it on the outside and then sand that smooth. The base sword itself, I'm planning to basically make the exact same way from at least 1 or 2 layers of this thick foam, and put basically skewers or rods inside to keep that thing stable, because it's going to be long. So obviously if the handle is 7 inches, the sword itself is going to be, I think I mathed it out to 38 inches. It's a big sword. So that's where we are. I still have to film where I got to on the coat. There's been a lot of parts of this project that I kind of keep bouncing back and forth, so it's made filming it a little bit difficult. But I am making significant progress with the foam pieces, little bits at a time. And I've also ordered some different buckles for the belt pieces, and I'm trying to get a lot of those little finishing details for this thing. I had to order more rhinestones so that I can put those all over the jacket. But this is where we are with the pommel, and I actually think it's kind of working. So handle update. I have the pommel fully attached together. It's not exactly the right shape. There's some elevation that's supposed to happen at the bottom. I don't care. This looks great, and I don't want to redo it. So I have the pommel there, and then this is the other half of the circle. As you can see, those edges have been sanded down for the most part. I've also decided that I think it looks fine. The circle is as circular as it was going to circle. As it rolls away from me. I may put just a little bit more foam there to hide that edge. As you can see, I've done with this one, as everything likes to stick to it. So when this dries tomorrow, I will sand that down. So how am I doing the rest of the handle? So I've made this. This is a giant stack of rectangles. So I've got 5 big rectangles and then these little ones to make the handle. So I think I've explained I'm not going to be making a blade that removes from the scabbard. I'm attaching the hilt directly to the scabbard for 2 reasons. 1, I've heard a lot of conventions will just zip tie a sword into the scabbard anyways. 2, time. Making those pieces the correct dimensions and all of that is going to be really hard. But in order for them to be 2 separate pieces, but doing it this way, I will still get the look and the piece for the costume, even if it's not exactly what I want. So, future thing. So what I'm going to be doing for this is I've made this little skin. You can see I tried to just hand draw it first, and then I decided to just etch it in. That is just a pencil. I do believe I'm going to go over those lines at least one more time. And this is just going to very nicely and neatly wrap around, and then I will have my handle. So, and there's actually kind of a good thing. There is actually a seam on the handle because it looks like it's a leather wrap that then has metal inlays. I'm doing it as one piece. I'm just going to be painting the little gold stripes on. It's just going to make my life a lot easier. And I think it'll still look okay. I'm just debating how heavily I think I need to score these before I fully attach it to this. But I'm basically going to cover this in contact cement and then probably cover this a little bit at a time and slowly roll it on up. So I'm pretty excited. We're getting places with the handle. I also have a few other little pieces. I think I've shown these. These are for the sides of the hilt. So once I get this, the guard, once I get this done, I'm going to work on the guard, more of the guard pieces, and the full length of the scabbard itself. So I'm pretty excited. Things are kind of coming together for the handle. So here you can see the core that I put together for this handle. It is a very thick stack of different layers of foam. In hindsight, I probably could have done this differently and with less pieces because it didn't need to be that heavy, but it's all right. But I applied contact cement to a good portion of the wraparound and then kind of to all the just generally exposed areas of the center part of the handle, lined it up and rolled. It ended up a little bit deformed because in trying to make sure it was very secure, I ended up squeezing it. So the handle maintained a little bit more of a square shape than I wanted. But overall, this method actually kind of worked and gave me the handle I was looking for a sword that needed to have no structural stability whatsoever. Because again, I was just making the scabbard and not the full sword that could be removed from the scabbard. It's all attached as one piece. So a little bit weird, but it worked. Oh my god. Okay, so I have the full handle so far. I do think this is coming out a little bit large, but I'm not really concerned. Cosplay is exaggerated, and my crown was too big, so it just plays the course that I would end up making the handle, and the sword itself too big. So I have the pommel attachment here. This is going to be the part that I'm going to make sure is facing me when I'm wearing it, so you won't see the back. It's not perfectly round, but you know what? I think we're doing okay if I focus on those details. This is never getting done. Yes, I know it's not perfectly around the bottom. Again, we're fine. So here's the top of the sword. So I have the 2 layers. This is the part, I don't know if I thought about doing this exactly the best way, but this is the way that I've done it. So again, I'm not making the blade, I'm making the scabbard. So this is gonna sit on there. And so I did a few things. So I made sure that this is kind of oval on top. And the way I did that is there's these 2 flat layers and there's a little extra piece. It's actually the rejects from the first few times I did this under that and laid a piece on top so I could get that nice little dome element to it. And you can see the back. I picked, this is the front because it looked a little bit smoother. That felt just a little bumpy. So again, that's the back. And so I have my side pieces attached there and I made this. So the way that this is gonna work is if I haven't lost it, oh no. Well, it appears I have lost it, but it's fine because luckily I have plenty more googly eyes where that came from. So it's a larger googly eye and I'm going to cut out the clear bit and then that's going to fit into that opening right there. I'm not putting it in yet because I do want to prime and paint this. I then have to paint the earth on this and then I will glue and slot it into place. And it does fit the one that I'd had that is now just lost to the abyss that is my crafting area. But again, I've got plenty more googly eyes, so it's fine. But what I'm going to do next is, so the angle of the next part of the sword is dictated by these guys. So it's going to come out here and then it kind of like scoops and sweeps along. So it starts about here, I think, and it's going to come out and sweep. I do have to look about whether the scabbard comes all the way up or not, but basically I'm going to place this on top of the foam that I'm going to use for the scabbard. And what I'm using is I'm going to do the same thing I've done for all of this, which is layer foam. But if you look, that's 2 layers of foam. I'm using an even thicker foam for the scabbard to make it truly look like the blade that's attached to this could fit inside of this. So this is a much thicker foam, and I'm going to be putting some wooden rods in it to make sure that it stays straight because I know it's not going to want to. But that's my plan and what's going on next. I'm trying not to break things. I'm really happy with how this looks. I know it's rough around the edges, but it's going to be painted and everything's going to be okay, and I'm going to have a sword. So I'm going to place this on top like that and draw kind of the shape. Should I have done this before I put the entire this together? Maybe. I think it'll be fine. So I've got a nice long piece. I'm going to trace out where this part sits and we're going to figure out how to go from here. Oh, also, part of why a lot of this looks so rough is the way I've been shaping it is with scissors, and trying to use the clay foam to kind of fill up some of my mistakes. So it's a little rough. I'm just kind of going with it. I think we will survive and everything will be a-okay. I could use a Dremel. Don't currently have one. I should probably invest in one. but from a distance, is it going to be a little rough? Yes. Am I well aware of the fact that I'm probably going to remake the sword at some point in the future so that it can actually pull out of the scabbard? Also, yes. So I'm not concerned. I think it will look okay. So this probably looks weird, but I'm actually going to do 3 layers. I was originally only going to do 2, but 2 of this is just a little too narrow. So I'm going to do a middle layer of this slightly thinner foam, and I'm going to take advantage of, as you can see, I've cut a bunch of slits in it, and I'm going to lay these skewers into this layer. That way I can cut it completely through this. I don't have to worry about like carving crevices or anything in this. I'm going to glue this completely down to one of the outer layers, then stick the skewers in it, and then glue the other outer layer on top. And that way there'll be this nice core of skewers that'll hopefully help keep this thing straight. I've got one in the middle and then 2 on the either side. So I'm hoping that this, along with just the gluing process in general, will help keep this thing nice, straight, and sturdy. So I'm going to get to gluing, and I will pause in the middle to show kind of how, I mean, not even cut these channels the right size, but we'll figure that out. And I will show kind of what it looks like and if it's working or not. So it looks like this is going to work. It's staying pretty stable, pretty sturdy. As you can see, I'm holding it and it's not warping. So I'm going to give it a little bit of a few more seconds of putting some even pressure all the way across. And then I'm going to go ahead and seal the top part on. So 3 cheers for ingenuity, I guess. I think this is actually going to work. And then I'm going to have a sword. I have no idea how to get any of this decently in frame. But, and here's the, so as we can see, I have to adjust it a little bit, but the top part fits into this quite well. And I'm not super concerned about gaps or anything, because again, it is, again, supposed to look like this comes out. So I think we're going to be just fine. And I can also clean this up with an X-Acto knife. So we're going to pop those skewers in, make sure I get it as flat as possible, and then glue that top part on. I bought a Dremel. I decided I was getting to a point in this project where I absolutely needed it, so I decided to make the investment, because if I continue to work with EVA foam in the future, this is probably going to be super great to have. So yeah, I stopped making excuses and went ahead and bought one. So unfortunately, the spray paint that I have for everything is a much more of a vintage toned gold, and what it really needs to be is this much more yellow gold. This is what I painted on the boot covers. And so I've decided, the good news is the pieces are two-toned anyways. So I think the background is the vintage gold and the raised details are the yellow gold. So I'm about to spend a lot of time hand painting all of the raised details, and this includes on the chest plate, to be this more yellow gold. So we will see how that goes. So I included this to show how I attached the collar pieces. As you can see, that top layer was painted with the nice yellow gold, and those inlays, which are essentially cavities, were painted black to mimic the fabric. I didn't want to cut them out because of this very reason. I was using them to sew it on and attach it to the collar of the undershirt. I'm using black thread very carefully in those gaps to completely stitch on the collar pieces. Now that does mean that there's no stitching around the very edges, but these ended up being really secure and already formed to the right shape, so that wasn't a problem. Also, sewing needles go through EVA foam really easily. I just want to give a quick update halfway through painting this thing. So as you can see, I have the two-tone on this side of the chest plate and no tone or monotone on this side. And I am kind of in shock and awe of how incredible the two-tone makes it look and how realistic, especially for the costume. And, you know, this I thought looked good until I did this, and I'm so freaking happy. So I am working on, this is 2 coats right now. You can kind of see what 1 coat looks like right there. Not super vibrant, so it definitely needs at least 2 coats, if not 3 coats. I kind of like doing a third because it also helps smooth out all of the little imperfections. And so that's great. 2 coats on just that section took me about an hour, and so there's another hour, and then there's 2 more hours on the back, and that's not even counting another hour probably for the belt. So got a long road of painting ahead of me, but like I think based on just this portion alone, it is going to be well worth it.
I don't know if I can accurately explain how freaking happy I am with how this gold looks. I think it just brought out the absolute best of the pattern. I think it makes it look so true to the outfit and just honestly incredible.
So now that I have everything painted, the next step is a buckle, and because that's what's actually going to attach this to that other piece that's floating over there. So I have these super small strips that I've painted gold, and this actually has to get cut into a pointy shape. And I have some more googly eyes, Domino has made an appearance, that are painted gold on the inside that's going to go here. And so this is going to get attached in such a way that the opening of the buckle is kind of like halfway across this gap. And then I'm going to have to put this on to figure out where this other side should attach over there. So I'm going to do this part first and get that all attached. I'm not sure if I'm going to use contact cement or a different glue, but as I drop it. Anyways, I'm going to attach that buckle. So unfortunately, I busted the snaps on the side. I don't think they were secured the best, so I can't do the side up. But luckily, I already measured. So when I measured, the reason I needed the chest plate on is this side is not attached. And so I measured, it's kind of hard to see. There's these two little diagonal lines right there, and that's where this is going to glue in. So this will eventually end up being a functional buckle that will open right there. This is the other belt that I have. And so the reason I needed that on, and so I'm actually going to take the chest plate off so that I don't accidentally rivet it. But I mean, look. It looks so freaking good. The snaps will work, especially if all I have to do is wear it for a con and I can figure out better attachment points later, because I'm not actually going to be... I didn't start setting up the filming setup until after I'd put the chest plate on, which was not the right move. Here is this monstrosity on camera. And so I actually think this is about the right size. The handle is the heaviest part of this thing because of the way I stacked the foam and built that. It also is canted. I would get points off on Forged in Fire for that. But it's supposed to sit about here on the hip. And you can see that this part kind of ends up angled like right under her chest. And if I hang mine there, that's exactly where it's gonna hang for me. So I think the sword is okay and it's not gonna hit the ground, so we're good. I also didn't plan this well. This thing is still wet from paint, but I can't do the next part of what I need to because Mother Nature hates me. It's raining outside and I need to spray paint the top of this gold, so I'm working on painting the bottom of it black. So what we're doing is I have these smaller belt pieces, and as you can see, it already has a buckle attachment half done as well, because this top part, this buckle is supposed to sit kind of in the middle of the hip. This is hard framing. So I was trying to figure out where this is going to sit so that I can, and this technically, this buckle sits a little off center. That buckle will not sit fully centered, but it doesn't really matter because the belt fits. Oh, and so the way that I did this, I don't know if I explained how expensive this buckle was. So the buckle that I bought for this is a specialty buckle because I really wanted these gold ends. Technically, all of the buckles look exactly like this one. However, based on the sizing, I think it's fine. And this buckle was very expensive, mostly because I needed 2-day shipping. So I've sewed the strip all the way down the back, and I used the gold thread because I wanted to get, I don't even know if you can see it. You see those little tiny stitch marks underneath, kind of at the edge of each one? I did it so that from a distance, you can't see that it's got something stitched onto the back, because this I knew was going to be pretty tight fitting and I didn't want the foam to be the ones under tension, so it's fully attached to the buckle and the foam's just sewn on top. So all tension and stress is going to the fabric, not the foam. So what needs to happen now is this, I have to cut at some point, and it's going to sit kind of, this buckle sits essentially vertical with this buckle, and it's going to get cut with wherever the sword hangs. These horizontal sides is where I'm pretty sure it attaches, but it doesn't hang straight. So I'm gonna think I do it, English. I think I'm gonna do it cantilevered. I'm gonna put one here and one here so that I can kind of force that tilt if they sit at the same height, because I've seen real hilts and scabbards that do that. That's kind of what I'm trying to figure out, is I have the sword and the sword needs to sit about there. Reach, yeah, that'll reach all the way to the end. So it looks like I actually I'm gonna cut this thing in half. So I'll show you what's going on with that. So the way I'm going to do the sword, have fun editing this, future me. I've got these gold rings because in some pictures, I can't tell if it's a prop, like a replica, or the actual prop has these gold rings that hang off here. So I'm not sure if I want to do jump ring attachments to the base of the sword, or if I want to do basically clasps or something, because I have tiny gold lobster clasps for jewelry, but I think they're gonna look really weird with such a big ring. So I'm not sure if I'm gonna use this or not. I think I want to use it. It's just how do I attach that to this? So I may just do black fabric looped through this. It's not gonna look as pretty, but it'll work. So, but this is gonna get essentially, I think I'm just gonna glue it straight to that. Not sure, again, this isn't super heavy, so I'm not super concerned about structural stability. I say that, I am concerned. So, rings are gonna get glued onto the sword. Sword is going on the hip. That's going there. These last pieces, this belt, I literally was waiting for this buckle before I could start any of the belt because I needed the buckle so I could cut the fabric or the binding to go on the inside of the foam before I could figure out how big to make the other things. So this buckle has been a keystone piece, and now I'm gonna try to attach the sword to it. So I just wanted to show, because I don't think I did, how I've kind of spray painted this sword so far. So I used a technique I learned from my dad back with spray painting model rockets. So this is the edge of the black, and I did actually on one side screw up and should have taped these together. I didn't, lesson learned, but that's okay. I can just repaint over that with some black. And so now what I get to do is, I didn't cover this inner ditch because I do have to paint that with the yellow gold, and trying to get the painter's tape in that little tiny crevice was just not going to work. In hindsight, I totally could have just spray painted that first, but I was really excited to get the whole sword together. So, you know, it's fine, and I can repaint it. It'll all work out. The way this is going to get painted, as you'll notice, I didn't really focus on covering it with the spray paint, and it's because these sections are actually going to be red, so I may have to brush this over with a thin layer of black paint before I can actually repaint those little lines to be gold, and then those sections to be a nice, like, deep red. But I'm leaving this part of the sword entirely in this color. I'm not painting over it. And that is because it really does look like the sword is a lighter yellow. The sword doesn't appear to be the more golden yellow that I painted a lot of these other pieces to. So I'm leaving the sword this color, even though most of the other detailing is this one. And it's just going to be what it's going to be. And I think it's going to look just fine, except this intersection right there is going to get painted that more yellow gold, and then that's gonna get painted there. I haven't been filming as much of the sword because this thing is obnoxiously long, and so getting it all into frame is just not gonna happen. And I actually have it right here. I found it. This is my little world, and I'll decide if I think this one looks terrible or not, but that's gonna sit right in there, and already I think that looks freaking incredible, so I'm super excited. So I'm gonna take this painting bags off, fix the paint job that I screwed up over there, and then I also purchased a clear coat spray that I'm going to put on the black part of the scabbard because looking at images of it, it's super glossy, shiny, so I want to make sure that I capture that as well, and so I'll be spraying this when it's all done with a nice super gloss clear coat. But until then, tiny painting detail time. So, in the midst of trying to multitask, so I've got this going right now, working on the sequins for the side of the jacket. I'm also trying to work on the sword. So I have this side attachment point done right now, and if you'll notice, this ring moves nice and freely, which is something I really wanted. And the way that I did that is that piece of fabric. How did I attach the fabric to the foam? Well, I just used my X-Acto knife and basically cut a small channel out of it, and then took this little bit of fabric and the end of a paintbrush and shoved it in the hole. So I'm about to repeat that process for this piece there, and then the side attachments will be on the scabbard. So this is how I've decided to paint the lines on. I'm using blue painter's tape to kind of get me that diagonal pattern, and it does go down the side, but this is actually going to be like a gray on the angle and the gold is on top. I also did realize looking at pictures, it's supposed to taper more and the angle's supposed to go higher up on the scabbard. I think we're fine. We've got what we've got. If you'll notice, there's black here because one of the best techniques to make sure that paint doesn't slip under the edge of painter's tape is seal it with a base coat first that matches the background color. In this case, my background color is black. So I am just using a makeup sponge, actually, that I have right here and dabbing it into those points. And then I will be going in
with my gold in those same points to make those gold lines. So, not sure if I'm going to do this on the back yet. I think I need to for like that complete look, but to be determined. For now, we have these 5 lines right here. Good news and bad news. Doing the sleeve didn't take nearly as long as I thought it was going to. Granted, it's only one side of the sleeve and it's a relatively small area. Bad news, it also didn't use as much as I thought it would. And I bought a lot in kind of preparation for this. Granted, I do still have the entire outside of the jacket to use, but to bedazzle, but we'll see. Here's the update on, I have 8 of them right now, plus that one that I'm finishing up, plus those strips, but those strips are really hard to work with. Those strips are kind of how I figured out how many I would need, because I know they're like one next to each other, but I figured if I just kind of used that estimate without fully seeing it all the way around, it would kind of account for the spaces. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I've got a lot of these. These are sticky, which is why working with these is really annoying, because I have to cut them, which is why you'll see me cut them into these little strips of 4, because it's easier to pull these off individually. So that's why I don't know that I'll actually use these, and I might just use these for the intended purpose, which is a bedazzled border. But we are going to work on the other sleeve. I'm using a glue called E6000. It's supposed to glue anything to anything, basically. And so technically the adhesive bond isn't complete for 24 hours. However, they do seem to be staying in place and not sliding around. So I do have some relative confidence in at least gently placing this sleeve over there while I flip it and work on the other sleeve. My thing that I'm making sure right now is that none of the extra fabric is sticking to itself, because if I accidentally glued this sleeve together, I would be so upset. So, on to more bedazzling. So, before I finish rhinestoning all the way up around the collar, I do kind of have to address how it stands up. And so, I sort of have a solution for this, but it's going to take a little bit of finagling. So, I've got 2 pieces of plastic in here right now. There's a smaller one that's supposed to live much higher up. And then there's this piece right here. I do plan to use the gold thread that I have to, once I get them to where I like, basically stitch 2 really like tiny channels that are hopefully invisible. The way that I've gotten those in there is this entire time I have left an opening in the back of the jacket. So you can see my inside and outside layer there, as well as all of the layers for my hood. So what I think I'm about to do to make this a little bit better is I'm going to stitch the inside 2 layers together, leaving me, so I'm going to stitch this together, and then I'm just going to leave the hole in the back so that I can still reach in and manipulate the plastic pieces, because I do need something, because along with these ones at the side, I do need some supporting the back. And what I'm making this out of is I'm actually using, I don't know if I've explained it already, this is a moldable plastic sheet, and the best part is it can be cut with scissors. Literally just plain old scissors cut through this thing. So it's really nice. There's a lot of options. I can get exactly the size I need, and it's relatively sturdy, and it's not like this is going to be super heavy. So I think this will do just fine for the job. I just have to make sure it gets put where it's supposed to. This pin is just an approximate center back, as it was eating up way too much fabric, because unfortunately that seam did not get put in the exact center, so it's fine. So I think I'm going to go ahead and stitch these front ones in place, and my backup plan for if this isn't kind of holding to the outside is just kind of stitch down this top fabric to more of the top of the jacket to hold it up and away from the inside. So I'm not entirely sure how that's going to go, but I am going to shove these as far down that way as they will go, and then stitch them in place, and then work on sewing up the back closure. So I'm currently working along the inside of the sequins, and I do realize that her jacket probably doesn't have these on the bottom, but because mine isn't going to sweep the floor, this will be visible, and so I'd rather continue that detail. Here's the part where I've realized this process is going to become even worse. So on the whole way the inside up, as I try not to get stuck in more glue, you're going to be able to see both sides. So I'm now about to try to match the sequins on this side with the placement of the sequins on the other side. So we will see how that goes. Oh boy. So I went ahead and decided to cut that angle in it and sew the attachment point on first, So that way I can just stitch this on and know that this is very secured to this, and I'll just have to hand stitch this onto the other one. But that's something I'm willing to deal with. So in the latest edition of working on random things, I am doing the small detailing. I wasn't entirely sure if I was going to do it at first or not, but I decided to. And I know it looks a little rough there, but here's some that's a little bit more dried, and you can see it dries to a really nice gold. So what is it? Well, it is an entire bottle of Elmer's craft glue, this glue all. It is then mixed with about a tablespoon of flour, and I have no idea how much of my gold paints. And I mixed it up, and I stuck it in a piping bag, and I have literally been piping it on. I kind of made my own puff paint, essentially. It's a little messy in some places, but like when it looks clean, it looks clean. And it actually isn't taking too long to dry, so I'm just doing it in sections as I go through. I already have both sleeves done, the whole bottom, and this is doing the straight up front of the center. And hopefully from a distance, it'll look fine. You can see the sleeve right there. I think when it dries, it blends in a little bit more and it's not terrible, because that's a detail that I really wanted to get on, but I wasn't sure how. And fingers crossed it won't look like trash when it's done. So one of the last things I need to address is the sleeves. I don't really want to leave all of this big raw edge in here, so I do have to cut and trim this up, paying attention to where my seam line is. And then to try to hide and protect this a little bit better, I cut myself some, I guess, I made sort of bias tape. I don't think it's true bias tape. It's just folded over on the edges and then folded over again. And so I'm just going to hand stitch this. This isn't structural or anything. It's literally just so I can put that there and it no longer has a raw edge. It'll have a really nice, pretty edge. So I'm going to clean up all of these loose threads, cut away a lot of this bulk, and then I'm just going to go around and hand stitch with black thread this black satin on the edge so that it is nice and clean and you don't see any of this mess. I do intend to enter this in a competition, and therefore I know they're going to look at all of these loose edges and look to see if this kind of messy work exists, and so I want to make sure it doesn't exist. So I'm going to go ahead and hand sew that on there, and I mean, look at how much nicer that looks already. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you the final product. So here's the quick update after one sleeve is done, and I mean, you just can't argue that that now looks incredibly well finished and refined in comparison to this one over here. The other thing is it'll help capture all those little extra edges of the satin and make sure that we're not going to have any issues with fraying because everything's all nicely wrapped and contained. So this took me about an hour, maybe a little bit more. So I'm going to cut and trim and finish the other one up too. So it is like Monday, and the convention I plan to wear this to starts on Friday, although the day I plan to wear it is Saturday. So I should not be starting something new, but I am. Because everything in the costume is comfortable except the crown. Here's the thing. Kinda knew that. I don't wear headbands. I don't wear anything that's typically compresses like my head, so that's not going to be comfortable. And especially with the weight and the balancing, like I know I'm not going to be able to wear the crown all day, but we are allowed bags, so I plan to take my mannequin head in a sturdy bottom bag, like with nothing else in it, and basically stick the crown in there when I'm not wearing it. The good news is she also has a fastener, which if you don't know is basically just a headpiece, like a little clip headpiece. So I have these clips that I actually bought from back when I did the Medusa makeup, as if that was so long ago. It wasn't. If you want to check it out, I'll maybe remember to put a card up in the corner. But it seems like it's a series of triangles on a base that looks really similar to the Terran Empire V or arrowhead. So I'm going to use that and some very, very blurry photos from Discovery as inspiration and attempt to make myself her fascinator headpiece. So here's the pattern I have so far. This is already too big, but hey, the crown was too big, so it makes sense that I'd make the fastener too big. These are made up, it's 4 pieces so far. I know it looks like there's more, but these are actually still attached at the center. And I cut the 2 lines, trimmed this a little bit, used the heat gun and pressed it to squish it closed. I did try pins, but that didn't end up working out, so that one has pinholes, but it's fine.
And then these were pushed up when they were glued on, if my camera wants to focus, so that they would kind of puff out like that. So these top layers curl up, and then there's some middle filler, and then the back ones lay down. They go the other way because it kind of curls with her head. So my current plan is to just make 3 more of these. They're kind of the same size, they're just longer. So I'm gonna do that, and because it's just the openings for the top ones, they don't have this folded centerpiece, but there are some skinnier pieces that go in the middle, so I'm gonna keep these to hopefully use as the centerpieces for the middle row, but I'm gonna cut out 3 more of these tall, pointy shapes to be the outside ones, and then fill in the center, and even if it's not exact, I think it's still gonna look good. So they're kind of stuck together because that's how contact cement likes to work. But these are the 2 pieces I have. Here's the one I showed earlier. Here's the one I just made. There's technically supposed to be another layer in this little middle one, but I'm not really concerned about it. The only concern I'm having is when you turn it to the side, there's a pretty big gap there. So I've made these little pieces, and I'm going to add them to the front section right here, so that they kind of sit in this gap, and then also just kind of help visually obstruct all of that chaos happening from the side. So those are the last 2 pieces I have to put on, and then I have to figure out what on earth is the best way. I might just attach this to bobby pins. Bobby pins may just be the better way to put this on. Or maybe a loop of fabric in the back that I slip onto it, because I don't really think I'm going to be snapping this whole thing back and forth. So we'll see, but I'm going to attach these on, and then that's a problem for, I think, once this thing is painted. So here is the fully spray painted headpiece. Obviously there's some places that are mostly black, but I'm about to hand paint some of these details in the yellow gold so that it matches the armor. I believe it's these big outer ones, and then I think these not the center ones, but these right there. So I'm going to hand paint those in the yellow gold, and then apply a few black rhinestones, and then figure out how do I want to attach a clip to this, and then it's done. Okay, so I'm going to try to do a full try-on of everything. I have the base layer, so that's the shoes, the pants, and the undershirt, as you can see with the collar details. I do think I'm going to take the collar in the back by just like a centimeter to try to force these to be a little bit more curved. So there is an order to how all of this is going to work. First up is going to be the shoe covers, and these are pretty easy. I know I'm not at actually the best angle right now to get my feet in frame, but like I can only do so much. I do have my boyfriend on standby just in case I can't do this myself. And hopefully, I'm not sure if I'll have the space underneath this to wear a real belt or not, so that's to be determined. Piece number 2 is the belt for this costume. So this is going right there, and maybe I'll just pin the pants to this belt, worst comes to worse. And I do believe, I think it makes sense to put the sword on next. So the next 3 steps are where I think this is about to get a little bit more complicated. So, because I obviously can't put the crown on first, but I also don't know if I can put the crown on myself with all of the other pieces. Oh, I do think I'm gonna have to pin the belt, my pants to this belt, like with safety pins or something, to make sure it sits at the right spot. Oh, fuck, I'm gonna have to be careful with how I walk to make sure I don't bonk my...
Is the sword supposed to sit inside or outside?
For current purposes, it's sitting inside. So technically, I don't think the shoulders sit... That's how it should sit.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be a little bit more...
Oh.
Yeah. But again, I did tighten the shoulders. But that looks... Now here's the, can I put this on by myself? What are you laughing at me for?
Just drop on.
Oh god, I mean my hair looks like I don't know what's in frame, I can't see. So that is the conclusion of all of the small pieces in their mostly finished state. There are a few things that happened in kind of the few days leading up to the convention that I kind of tweaked and changed that I'll show in my next video, along with just kind of talking about the convention itself. So I had a really good time. It was really fun to show this whole thing off, and I'll talk about that more then. But thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.